Okay, so we're going to start now so that we have plenty of time to get into the data that we're going to be sharing today. So welcome. Good afternoon if you're in Central or Eastern time, and good morning if you're here in the West. My name's Steve Werblow. I'm here with the Conservation Technology Information Center. I'm going to moderate today's program, which is the unveiling of the 2025 National Cover Crop Survey Report. This one is extremely exciting for us. It's the eighth National Cover Crop Survey report that we put out. This has been since 2012 a project of SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program with USDA, CTIC, and the American Seed Trade Association. We're really excited to be able to focus this year's survey on agricultural advisors, which, as you'll see, is a different information source for us. So we're very excited about that. These reports over the years have been used widely in media, in research. They've been read into congressional testimony. They're a project that we're really proud of. And I'll explain why. Let's go to the next slide. So CTIC has been part of this again since 2012, and it fits right into the mission of championing, promoting, and providing information on sustainable agriculture and technology. And so for the past 43 years, CTIC has been engaged in this advocacy and information sharing, technology transfer. And it's been a real pleasure to work with SARE and ASTA to help accomplish that through these cover crop surveys. Let's go to the next slide. So CTIC's partners and members are depicted on this slide, so you get a sense of the breadth of perspectives that CTIC brings together. So we are that safe space where we can all talk about conservation technology, conservation agriculture, things to help get conservation on the ground. Let's go to the next slide. So here's a brazen commercial for our upcoming tour, which will be just in a few weeks. Registration officially ends today. So if you're interested in checking out a phenomenal tour and taking a look at conservation practices on the ground, talking to a wide range of people about conservation, check out this tour. And you can go check it out on our website, ctic.org/tour. So let's go to the next slide and we'll get into today's webinar. So we're going to hear from the three principal partners who've been involved in the research and assessment and writing of this report. So we have Andy Levine, CEO of ASTA, Ryan Heiniger, who is the Executive Director of CTIC, and Rob Myers, who is kind of the cover crop guru for all of this, and member of SARE and regional director there in the North Central region. I want to go to the next slide too with a special thank you. We also got funding from the American Soybean Association, which has helped make this project possible. And I really want to acknowledge Bethany Bedecker from the Missouri University Center for Regenerative Agriculture. She was at the heart of going through all the data and the instrument and making this all happen. So I want to acknowledge her work on this. And with that, a couple of little housekeeping bits. This is being recorded. So we will have an archived version that will be on the CTIC website, on our YouTube page, and we'll share that link with you. So we encourage you to share with other folks. And we will be doing Q&A at the end. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A question mark and voice balloon. Please write your questions into that, and we will address as many of them as we can when we get to the end of the program. With that, I'm going to hand the microphone to Andy Levine with a question about more background. If you can give us a little bit more background on the history of the surveys and how the information's been relevant to the seed industry, that would kick us off. So Andy, can you help us with that?
Sure can, Steve, and thanks to you for moderating our session this afternoon. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andy Levine, President and CEO of the American Seed Trade Association. And I want to thank you for joining us today as we release the findings from our 24-25 National Cover Crop Survey. This has been a long-standing partnership, as Steve mentioned, and I'd like to take a moment to thank SARE and CTIC for their partnership over the years, as well as the many farmers who have taken the time to share their insights and experience. As Steve mentioned, this partnership between SARE, and CTIC began in 2012, where we saw a need and an opportunity to gather perspectives on the use of cover crops from farmers and crop advisors nationwide. The 24-25 report marks the 8th SARE CTIC ASTA National Cover Crop Survey. The survey information from past years has been used by conservation districts, agency personnel, seed companies, farm suppliers, researchers, and policymakers to guide resources into research, communications, and other policies around cover crops in our conservation plantings. Through the various iterations of the survey, we've been able to glean strong information from producers and landowners on yield impacts, driving factors in purchasing decisions, and program participation in public and private initiatives. Can we go to the next slide, please? As we look at the value of cover crops and the discussions that we've had over these years, and for all these years, cover crops have served as a valuable tool for producers in achieving specific environmental and economic goals. Whether you're addressing concerns impacting your operation or seeking the environmental and economic impacts associated with the use of cover crops, the seed industry remains committed to ensuring that farmers and landowners have access to high quality, professionally produced seed to achieve your goals on your operation. The benefits afforded to producers through conservation practices, including the use of cover crops, depend on the right seed tailored to the specific goals and conditions of each unique farming operation. Data collected from past surveys shows us that interest in cover crops remains strong, continues to grow, and it further emphasizes the valuable role cover crops can play in farm systems. Next slide, please. The seed that we see, that we buy, and that we use today likely began its production process up to 2 years ago. Because of this, the seed industry must anticipate demand far before purchasing decisions are made by producers. For the seed industry, the data from these surveys helps us better forecast demand for cover crop seed to ensure that growers have access to the high quality, professionally produced seed to fit their individual needs. In addition to better understanding cover crop acres and anticipating demand for the future, survey results have given us a better understanding into the research pathways of interest for cover crop users. Innovation drives the seed industry across our board, no doubt about it. And we're constantly striving to produce better seed, to produce better food, feed, fiber, and fuel for a better quality of life. The valuable insights provided through these surveys have helped inform business decisions, research priorities, and even provided education to Congress as they develop key policy initiatives. I'm confident that the release of this year's survey will mimic past surveys in providing value to a broad range of efforts. Again, thank you for joining us on today's call, and I'm looking forward to today's presentations. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks a lot, Andy. I really appreciate it. And we all really appreciate ASTA's support through the years and the partnership that you've presented. And sharing also the things that are happening behind the scenes to make cover crops viable. And when we talk about behind the scenes, I realize I did not acknowledge Peyton Englert from ASTA, who's also been a huge part of this process for several reports now and has been a real driver in terms of getting an instrument that works well and getting the communications right around it. So thank you, Peyton.
Thanks for that, Steve. She's a rock star on our team.
She totally is. So with that, Ryan, I'm gonna point the mic at you and ask you if you could describe how this year's survey is different compared to other years, and who's been involved.
Thank you, Steve. This indeed is a great twist to keep things fresh from the longstanding report. And before I jump in, I also want to just extend a personal sincere appreciation to the entire team that have been mentioned here, but I guess from where I sit, a shout out to Bethany, to Peyton, Rob, Steve, and the team here at CTIC. None of our work on this report and the other mission endeavors would be possible without great partners and great team members. So as has been mentioned, for the first time with this long-running series, we did deviate on the focus to change gears a little bit and really hone in on the insights of advisors. And we broadly defined that, as you'll see in the coming slides and the data, and for those of you that dig deep into the full report. And so advisors really ranged everything from soil and water district and local NRCS personnel to nonprofits, seed dealers, and those folks at ag retail and other crop consulting locations. So it really did capture tremendous background. And as you can see here from the distribution across the country, and this is always humbling when our data starts to roll in, that so many people take the time to share their great insights from across the country. And this year was no different, with nearly 650 responses from 47 different states. And as you would maybe predict, a pretty strong emphasis across the Midwest. Great to see my home state of Iowa strongly represented again. I think in our last farmer survey from a couple of years ago, we had 49 states represented. And maybe a quick question for my fellow panelists: if you would welcome and join me for our next survey to go out to Hawaii and make sure we absolutely get at least one survey from that state. But again, all joking aside, what a tremendous response rate, and thank you all for taking the time to give us your insights that we're sharing here today. Additionally, I also want to call out, and this will come through a couple different times, that of our total responses, some 77% identified as certified crop advisors. And so I also want to thank our partners with the CCA program in Madison, Wisconsin, along with our partners over at the Ag Retailers Association for helping us get the word out about this survey last fall. So again, I think the goal for getting a broad cross-section of input was absolutely accomplished for this year's survey. Next slide, please. And as you can tell from this chart here, we did absolutely, I think, hit a home run getting input from ag retail, crop consultants, state agencies, really the full spectrum of ag and conservation advisors. The ag, retail, and crop consultants represent nearly 50% of the total responses. Again, thanks to our partners at CCA and Ag Retail and others. But I also want to just quickly call out the third highest response category, and that is farmers who advise other farmers. Here at CTIC, a couple of years ago, thanks to support from a number of partners, we were able to launch a cover crop coaching program focused in South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So we're helping deliver this firsthand, but I also want to point to our past survey that I think 40% of the farmers that responded had 10 years of on-the-job expertise delivering cover crops on their farms. So they, I think, still represent a huge amount of untapped potential intellectual property to help us continue to expand and other farmers be successful in their adoption of cover crops. Next slide, please. So this is one of those check all that apply type of questions, just to try to get a sense of exactly how the advisors are interacting with their grower clients. And as you might imagine, again, with that heavy emphasis on ag retail, certainly the agronomic support, the seed sale support was fairly prolific, but also across the board universally, again, whether you're working out of a local service center office, working at the local co-op, on-farm visits are by far the most widely used method or strategy, if you will, of interacting with farmers. And that is great, right? Because then you can actually walk the fields, see firsthand, and really talk about the goals and objectives. So I also think it's noteworthy, and want to also call out the about 27, 28% that are relying on remote and virtual farm interactions. And that might not be too novel at first blush. And of course, it could be as simple as a phone call, right? But with quite a few of our survey respondents, about 30% reported working at the state or regional, defined as many or multiple states. So of course, doing those on-farm visits may not be practical or efficient. And so what I'm fascinated by, and would love to get some feedback from others, maybe during the Q&A, is how are Zoom calls, FaceTime type of video calls fostering even more in-depth technical assistance out in the field, even though you might be dozens or hundreds or halfway across the country, being able to advise farmers in your network and peer community. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a spoiler alert, not to take away some of the thunder that Rob is going to cover here shortly, but I think it's probably fair to say that some of the most fascinating and intriguing insights from the survey pertain to being able to tease out advisors who also farm. And for that subset, do they use cover crops? Have they used cover crops in the past on their own operations? And as you can clearly see here, some 70% of advisors who also farm use cover crops. Of course, it's worth noting that about 10% have used cover crops at some point in the past, but when we surveyed them last fall, they were not currently using cover crops. So, that could be a situation where perhaps they didn't see that economic return, and that'll come out in some of the data as well. And just to further level set this particular data set, it was almost split 50-50 between advisors who farm and advisors who do not farm. I think it was about 54-46, 46 being advisors who also farm. Next slide, please. So in terms of reach, as you read the full report, you'll find a couple different data points, both in terms of number of farmers reached by different groupings, but I want to also just zero in on the acre impact, which is quite impressive. When you look at those advisors touching at least 10,000 acres to possibly more than 250,000 acres in their role, about 60% fall into that specific category between 10,000 and 250,000 acres or more. But clearly the sweet spot between 10,000 and 50,000 is where the majority of advisors are focusing their efforts, whether that, again, is at a county or multi-county level, or sometimes regionally and nationally. Next slide. I think this is also a pretty fascinating set of insights here that should probably further reassure a lot of farmers who are receiving the great advice from advisors. And that is that overwhelmingly, there's a great deal of confidence that comes with the team who are making farm calls, making presentations, sharing other information and educational opportunities. And what is also fascinating, and I think probably correlates fairly closely, is that there's an awful lot of experience that is gathered on the job, and that, as you can clearly see here, about 2% do not have that confidence. And as of our survey last fall, about 2.9% had a year or less of experience on the job. And so, of course, as they get more training, more mentoring on the job and through other means, that confidence level goes up over time. Next slide. The survey, of course, asked a lot of very detailed questions, but to me, some of the real important takeaways are the testimonials in their own words. What are they seeing directly? What are they hearing from their producers? And so in this context, it is really about the motivation that the advisors have for helping promote, helping champion, helping sign up, helping deliver cover crops and other soil health practices. And again, as you would maybe predict, soil health, diminishing soil erosion, improving water infiltration, being able to better facilitate livestock integration, providing economic returns are all things that seem to rise to the top. But also some of those testimonials directly from the advisors who farm came through loud and clear of the nearly 500 different quotes that we received with this open survey opportunity. They're just third one from the top to know that they remain profitable and can continue farming in a challenging and economic environment. Next slide. And just to, again, provide some brief snapshots talking about nutrient cycling, even though it is their job, talking about the other benefits that can help diminish or reduce herbicide, fertilizer, or tillage use out in the field. To also just put it succinctly, as one advisor wrote, they simply work. And also, as another that I think hit on one of the 6th principles of soil health, which is patience. And they were quoted as saying, you know, it is a marathon, not a sprint. Next slide. And again, before I wrap up and turn things over to Rob to continue to unpack the great report, I want to just come back momentarily to the category of advisors who farm and use cover crops, as shown on the left, and advisors who farm and do not use cover crops currently in their operation, and particularly highlight that 55% category who overwhelmingly think that cover crops are a great strategy, a great tool, and highly recommend them, compared to only about 9% of advisors who do farm, but not actively using cover crops. So I think one of the also action items and the great insights from the report for those looking for that champion in their network, find an advisor, again, whether that's a CCA, local NRCS, or soil and water personnel that does have that direct firsthand experience, and be able to engage them as a mentor and as an additional resource in your own cover crop promotion and implementation. So with that, happy to turn things back to you, Steve.
Thanks a lot, Brian. That was great. Great background on the survey itself and the folks who engaged in it and shared their insights. I see some folks have found the Q&A down the bottom. Please do type in questions. We'll be addressing questions at the end of this program. And with that, let's dig into the next level of data. So Rob, we've got almost 50 pages of report here and lots of perspective that people shared. Can you share with us some of the key findings and conclusions that you see in the data that we collected?
Certainly will, Steve. And I'll quickly say I'm not going to go through all 50 pages of the report. Fortunately, Ryan really set the groundwork, and I appreciated the background and history that Andy provided in providing some context for the report. Before we go to the next slide, I'll just reemphasize this key point that Ryan made, which is this particular figure, which is in the report, really is pretty striking when you think about it. Those that actually have experience working with cover crops have become very convinced of the benefits. And that's something we hear from farmers widely, that once they've had a few years of experience with cover crops, they really tend to stick with them. They have become a believer in the benefits for soil health and other aspects of their farming, and ultimately in their economic bottom line. So next slide. So one of the questions was, what percentage of your farmer clients use cover crops? Of course, this varied from advisor to advisor, but overall, 54% of those said that it was a quarter or less of their farmers. And this isn't surprising. Keep in mind, a lot of these farm advisors are advising dozens of clients that have a variety of farming approaches. But we do see, if you look at the yellow slice, that there was a group of advisors that a quarter to a half of their farmers were doing it. And then if you look at the green slices, those were advisors who had a pretty high percentage, over half of their farmers using cover crops. Next slide. The barriers that you hear about from farmers not adopting cover crops, keep in mind that these are perceptions that are from farmers who haven't gotten into cover cropping, but it's important to acknowledge that these perceptions are driving farmers' decision making. So the two big ones there are the economic return. There's a question from those who have not yet used them. Is this really going to pay off for me? Understandably, any farmer making a decision on spending money on inputs, whether it's cover crop seed, new equipment, a fungicide, they've got to evaluate the economics. So there's a perception among those that haven't yet used them that there might not be that economic return, especially in the first year. We could look at our past cover crop surveys of farmers to see quite a bit of economic data that actually does show that cover crops pay off, especially after the first 2 to 3 years. But again, this is a perception that holds some farmers back. The time and labor is the second one I want to point to, almost equally high to the economic question. This is something we've seen in other farmer surveys, that farmers are concerned about the time to do anything. They're all busy, especially during planting and harvest season, and they wonder, am I going to have time when I'm trying to get my crop harvested in the fall to deal with getting cover crops seeded? Fortunately, we have seen farmers using cover crops figure out solutions to this. They're hiring their ag retailer to put on that cover crop, or an aerial applicator. In the last year or two, we've started to see people apply them through drones. I know some farmers provide the service of seeding cover crops for their neighbors. Some hire a relative that can help seasonally to put on the cover crop, or someone else available on a short-term basis. So there's lots of different ways farmers are getting the cover crops seeded and managing them. But again, a definite concern by those not yet using them. And then you can see there's kind of a variety of other concerns that sometimes hold farmers back, but the two big ones are the labor, time, and the potential economic impact. Next slide. So what is the reason that farmers actually do get started? We're kind of flip around the previous one. What motivates them to get started? Well, this is something similar to what we've seen in some other surveys. Reducing erosion is a big one. The role of incentive payments is an interesting one. We have had dived into that in our past cover crop surveys of farmers. So there's some data, particularly the last two surveys, that really get into the incentive payments, but it is playing a role. We've seen a wider variety of incentive payments in recent years. Some of those are coming from traditional NRCS programs like the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. Some are coming from state funds. We're also seeing more private companies providing cover crop incentive payments. So all those things are having an impact, but you see lots of other benefits have been important for a portion of farmers. Next slide. So in terms of incentive payments, we asked what are the types that people are using most, and it won't be a surprise to most of the people on the call that NRCS is the #1 source. Indeed, the largest amount of dollars flowing to cover crop incentive payments are coming not only from the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, but the Conservation Stewardship Program are the two big ones within NRCS. We've seen other special projects that have been funded by NRCS through competitive grants that have also provided support for cover crops. And then, as I said, in some states, we have strong state incentives. I'm in Missouri. We have a big soil and water program supported by a state sales tax. Maryland has a big state program. In fact, quite a few other states have state programs. Some are tied to particular delivery mechanisms, like tying it to crop insurance. Iowa, Illinois, and some other states are doing that. The Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities program has been going through a transition. Just announced yesterday that program is being renamed, but some of those programs on cover crops are continuing, is my understanding. We see some private sector programs, as I mentioned, from a number of the large food and ag companies to provide incentives. And then there are a lot of farmers who are just doing it on their own dime. 35% in the surveyed advisors felt that that was driving the farmers just investing their own funds. So incentives are important, but not the only story. Next. So when we ask the advisors, what specifically are you advising farmers on related to cover crops? There's a wealth of management questions that farmers have, but the number one thing was the cover crop species. And I have to credit our wonderful seed industry in the United States, and we're so happy to have the American Seed Trade Association involved in this work and the many things they do to support the seed industry. Farmers have a choice today of over 40 different species of cover crops. And if you're a corn and soybean farmer or a cotton farmer, you're used to maybe just working with one or two or three crops, and all of a sudden you've got a catalog with 40 different species of cover crops. It's no wonder that 87% of advisors are helping farmers on those species selections. Now, there are some simple ways to get started, like using cereal rye in front of soybeans, but a very common question to get advice on species. Two other really common questions are getting that cover crop established. We see a wide range of methods, like I alluded to earlier, aerial broadcasting, direct seeding through drills and crop planters, some using broadcast spreaders like high clearance spray machines, others doing it with tillage devices that are broadcasting, lightly incorporating that seed. So farmers have questions, understandably. What's the best method for my situation? That's often in the fall, if it's a fall planted cover crop, and then the reverse is in the spring when they're trying to terminate that cover crop if it overwinters. Some questions there as well. We'll see more about that in a moment. And then they may have questions about other aspects of management, as you can see here. Next slide. So when the advisors are talking to the farmers, there's often a conversation, is this really going to benefit my operation? And so we ask the advisors, what are the top 3 benefits you're really advising your farmer clients about? Soil health, it really jumps up there with reduced erosion. And we've seen farmers mention this on past surveys that soil health is a big, big driving force. I'd also point out, though, lots of other benefits that the advisors are talking to their clients about, and I'm sure that depends on their situation. If they've got a particular weed issue, that may be something the cover crops are helping with. If they need to get better rainfall infiltration, you see that's one that's getting a fair number of response. So definitely lots of benefits. This is one of the unique aspects of cover crops as a management tool. Next slide. And then when you've asked what are the 3 topics you're asked most about by the farmers, this kind of relates to that earlier slide we saw where the species selection was important. But they're also asked a lot about these economic questions. Is this going to pay off? And then back to some management things like the termination timing, how to terminate, and then some of the fall seeding types of questions. So a variety of questions, and this is why our farm advisors are so valuable, whether they're a certified crop advisor, an ag retail employee, seed industry, a rep, and others. Next. So we wondered, when you're an ag advisor, where are you learning about cover crops? And this was interesting to see. The biggest number said they'd kind of learned about it on the job, and we'll see in a moment the ways they're learning about it. But quite a few kind of learned about it through their own farming experience because they're trying the cover crops themselves. And they're also learning a lot from farmers. And I will say, as an agronomist based in a university system, I would attribute most of my knowledge about cover crops to farmers. Certainly, I read research papers and reports, but I've really learned the greatest amount about cover crops by listening to other farmers. Even though I've used them myself in the field for many years, they are a great source of information. Next slide. So this was interesting when it comes to advisors, how we might work with them. And many of you on the call are involved with putting on programs to provide cover crop or soil health information to farm advisors. I thought it was interesting that I might have predicted that they would always prefer an in-person event, but when it came to a shorter event, like a 1 to 2 hour event, interestingly, majority preferred a virtual event, probably convenient to fit in their schedule, maybe while they're eating lunch or otherwise. But once we get up to a little longer time frame, like a half-day event, then boy, it changes fast. They really prefer that in-person event if they're going to sit down and be able to gather some information for a half-day or a full-day event. So kind of something I found interesting to be thinking about as we're putting on education and training programs. Next. So another question about related to the education background is where you go for information on cost share opportunities. Not surprisingly, they're going a lot to their USDA offices. That often would be NRCS. Soil and water conservation districts, SWCDs, are another big source. They are getting information from other sources as well, but the two big ones being USDA and the soil and water districts. Next. So in addition to their advising, we asked what other strategies do you use to further support your farmers? And notably, they're trying to get their farmer clients out to field days. I think we all find when we have a chance to go to a field day, see those things in person, that's always a valuable learning event and lots of good information sharing at those field events. Also, these advisors are sharing articles and videos. I know the programs I work with, we're increasingly doing short videos on different aspects of cover crop management and selection, and those are being helpful to producers. Of course, if you got auto steer in your tractor, you maybe can catch a few short videos while you're going through the field on the tractor and it's steering itself if you have that capacity. But lots of variety of sources being used for sure. Next slide. So trends, we always want to kind of look ahead, and we ask the advisors what trends are they anticipating associated with cover crops. And the number one is the growth in acreage. They are feeling confident that the acreage is going to continue to grow, that more and more farmers are seeing the benefits. The farmers that have started with cover crops on a field or two are going to be expanding their acreage. And so I think that's a really important takeaway from the survey is the advisors are projecting that we're going to have this continued growth. They also are recognizing that this point about combinations of soil health practices, that as farmers get into cover crops, they're seeing benefits of soil health, and that's making them ask, well, what else can I do for soil health? Maybe I need to change my tillage system, or maybe I need to get a third crop into that rotation, or make some other changes to my management. If possible, maybe even graze that cover crop. So we're definitely seeing a trend of looking at ways to integrate a variety of soil health practices. Next slide. So that's a few highlights from the report. There is much, much more in the report, so I encourage you to download that and take a flip through it. There's lots of great information here. You can, of course, also go back to the earlier surveys as well, but appreciate the chance to share some of this information. And Steve, I'll hand it back to you to facilitate some discussion.
Great. Thank you, Rob. So yes, there is plenty of opportunity now, next 20 minutes or so, to ask questions. I've got some in the Q&A that are queued up, and we'll be looking for more. So please do type in some questions, and we'll try to get everybody addressed. One relatively simple question that came up was, how was the survey disseminated? And so this was all done online through a Qualtrics instrument. So that is detailed in the report. As Rob said, it is available for download right now. It's officially unveiled. And so there's a methodology section that you can check out. But yes, it was an online survey.
And Steve, if I could just add in there,
Yeah.
Ryan alluded to earlier, a key thing was the American Society of Agronomy did send it out to their large list of thousands of certified crop advisors. The Ag Retailers Association sent it out widely to ag retail owners and managers. Of course, American Seed Trade Association sent it out within the seed industry. Obviously, CTIC, SARE shared this as well. So there are a variety of groups that helped to promote the survey.
Yes, and Lester Publications also publicized it. So yeah, that was it. We really tried to reach out to as many kinds of advisors as we could. So, all right. With that, I've got a question here. It's a fascinating one. I'm going to read it verbatim. So, in order to make real impact on water quality and flash flood reduction, we need to start thinking watershed-wide soil health. How do we start getting that concept deeper into the conservation partnering with ag retailer and associations? Rob, I'm gonna hand that one to you first. What do you think in terms of how to get that watershed wide thinking going, and the role that cover crops can play in it?
I think we've seen some successful implementations of that approach in various regions of the country where people will kind of form a collective effort within a watershed and say, you know, if the majority of us in this watershed take a few simple actions, it can make a really big impact by multiplying our efforts. And so cover crops aren't certainly not the only conservation strategy that's been used, but it's been one of the most popular ones at both the watershed scale and above. So the challenge, I think, is how do you get enough people to implement the practice in that area? And there have been a variety of approaches used, education being first and foremost, but we have seen special incentives for certain watersheds where if you're within that watershed, you get it. So my home farm in central Illinois has been part of a watershed-based effort in that area, and they provided some extra incentive in that area. But I think it is a helpful idea that people within a watershed, they're all not only sharing that water resource, but impacting that water resource. And if they can band together to collectively take action with approaches like cover crops, that can make a pretty significant impact that has real benefits for that region.
Great. And Ryan, I'm going to point that to you as well. I know CTIC has been involved with uh, watershed scale stuff, ranging to, Indian Creek project several years ago and other things. How do you see the watershed scale working in a cover crop promotion kind of way?
Good question. Just to try to build on Rob's insights as well. I'd come at it maybe two different ways, just trying to think about our audience joining us today. You know, if you're an on-the-ground practitioner, again, in a local conservation office with a nonprofit or something along those lines, I would simply start by just going and walking in the door and introducing yourself at the local ag co-op or multiple locations in many cases. And just building that network, building that relationship if one does not already exist. I know in my career, I've certainly coached and encouraged different team members to do so and take that step. And then, of course, sit down and do a lot of listening in terms of what the overlap is, what the opportunities are, maybe what some past experiments have been to just build on that. And then I guess more for the managers and other folks joining us today as well, you know, to look for ways that you can further incentivize and build programs with them. Maybe it's offsetting some of the equipment needs at that ag co-op, looking for some creative solutions there to get at the heart of one of the things that Rob touched on, which is, you know, time is always of the essence in the fall. And how can that ag co-op play an even stronger role in helping cover more acres quickly and efficiently for many different partners. And then, of course, one of the models that I think has been growing over the last 5 and 10 plus years is this, you know, conservation agronomist, where whether, again, it's a nonprofit, whether it's different funding sources and partnerships coming together, but funding an actual, professional, full-time individual that works out of those local co-ops helps be that point person to be able to keep track of the different programs, the different timelines and different support mechanisms that exist, which, you know, for those of us in this job full-time, it can be overwhelming at times. And so having that point person locally that's knowledgeable, that has those relationships with other sales agronomists, for example, can also go a long way to getting some things going where perhaps there's not currently.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. So now we have another question, and I'm going to point this first to Andy and then to Rob. What's the thought about ensuring a soil health analysis is used to generate the cover crop mixes? So that idea of compatibility with your goals as it relates to the mixes you choose.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a conversation with your seed sales rep, either from the seed company, your retailer, or your co-op, and as they become more and more familiar with cover crops and the use of, or recommendations for the use of cover crops, they also should be familiar with your soil types and, you know, the soil health that you've got. And in most cases that I'm aware of, are doing some form of regular soil testing to see where they are. So bringing all those together, your seed sales rep is going to be able to provide you some recommendations for that mix. I know Rob and Sarah and CTIC and other regional groups have recommendations for their regions, but then you get down to your operation and, you know, what's your plan for your specific operation? How much do you want to invest in the cover crop side? What's their long-term goal and how do you get there? And that's that collaboration between the seed company and the farmer.
Great. And it's phenomenal that we have that infrastructure behind us. Rob, any suggestions in
Well,
terms of soil testing?
that was well said by Andy, and I appreciate the seed industry is doing a great job of providing farmers with some seed choices. We sometimes hear the comment that cover crops is an old practice, which it is. It goes back to the time of the Greeks and Romans in the United States. Luminaries like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson used cover crops on their farms. But there are new things. There's new ways we're managing them. And there are new varieties and species of cover crops being used. And the seed industry deserves a lot of credit for helping provide some innovation in that regard. So when we think about soil health testing, the question is how they fit together. And I think we have a ways to go in that regard. Certainly, even traditional soil testing may show that the organic matter is low, so that might indicate that it's important to get a high biomass cover crop as part of the mix. It may indicate that the capacity of that soil to provide nitrogen fertility without having to put on a lot of purchased nitrogen is important. So maybe a legume is fitting. But in thinking about soil health testing, newer ideas like how do we get more mycorrhizal fungi and are there certain species or cover crops that help with that? We're kind of still learning about that. We know that some are more likely to be helpful than others, but more is needed in terms of relating those two. But as Andy said, talking to your seed rep is a good place to start on that question.
It really does set a stage for some exciting new research, I would imagine. We have a question. Are there any plans to release state-specific reports? For instance, you know, all the data that came out of Illinois, for instance. Ryan, I'll point that one to you.
As far as releasing individual state reports, at this time, we don't have immediate plans and the capacity to do so. However, I would be interested in visiting offline with those folks that would like to dig a little bit deeper and see if there are ways that this insight could be helpful for your specific program. So I'm happy to drop my email into the chat and hopefully pick up the conversation on other ways that we can lend support to our community.
Thank you. We've got a greetings from the SARE office in St. Paul. Question is, for incentive payments, do we have any observations about how they may be combining those incentives? Rob, I'm going to point that one to you.
Sure. Well, we're definitely seeing farmers start to do that in the last 2 or 3 years. Most typically, they're combining a government-supported incentive payment, whether federal or state, with a private sector payment that's aimed at particularly soil carbon benefits. It could be aimed at other environmental benefits, but the idea is that if you're receiving, for example, an EQIP incentive payment or a state payment, that is not giving the farmer any particular value for the soil carbon benefits they may be generating from that cover crop. So there may be a private company, and there are quite a few now offering it. I would say there's easily, in the Midwest at least, over a dozen different companies offering soil carbon payments associated with cover crops. It may be less in other areas of the country. So we see those opportunities. I would say that farmers get a little confused, and I do too, because there are so many choices out there. And you really need to ask the people with that private sector program which opportunities they are compatible with. But I would encourage farmers and their advisors to be looking at ways to put those two things together, because that can lead to a little better economic support for the farmer, and just is an opportunity that we have at this moment in time to take advantage of.
Great, thank you. Ryan or Andy, do you have anything to add to that? Anything you've observed in terms of stacking incentives?
The one thing that I might add, again, going back a little bit to a very brief commercial here, is the opportunity if you're a service provider, and that's anything from, a farmer that has a side gig to help drill or use drones or other methods to seed cover crops. If you're a seed provider, if you're providing advice, if you have cost share in any form, CTIC is working with a number of partners, including the Nature Conservancy, Houston Engineering, Wolf Neck Center, and others, in building this conservation connector to be released later this year. You can reach it at connector.ag. For some VPNs, there are some issues that you may encounter. We found that mostly, I think, on the USDA side, but the Conservation Connector aims to be a central clearinghouse where farmers, where advisors, and others can go and find information on what programs and practices are available, what other technical experts are available in their area. You can create your own listing and have your own program up and running in generally about 30 minutes. It comes to us for a quick review, and then it's online. So think of this as the Facebook marketplace for all things conservation, technical and financial assistance. And to date, in our work that culminated with an unveiling to our community last fall at the Sustainable Ag Summit, cover crops and soil health practices and service providers have been a majority of the programs that have found their way into the connector so far. So check it out and look for a fit with the practice and program that you have. And of course, one of our goals there is to showcase where the stackability may exist between the private sector programs that Rob alluded to and more traditional Farm Bill and other cost share support.
Great, thank you. And Ryan, can you give us that URL once again? And we'll see if we can also get it into the chat.
It is connector.ag.
Super. Thank you. All right, Rob, I'm going to put you back in the hot seat because you are the man with the data. So this question is, the USDA's 2022 Census of Agriculture reported that the total U.S. cropland planted to cover crops increased by 17% between 2017 and 2022, rising from approximately 15.4 million acres to nearly 18 million acres. What factors have contributed to the steady increase in cover crop acreage among users, and how do these align with the broader national trends observed between 2017 and 2022? And the questioner also asked to confirm those acreage figures, make sure that those acreage figures are, in fact, what you've been working with as well.
Yeah, those are the figures that were reported in the Census of Ag. And I would point out that the Census of Ag is only done once every 5 years. And it simply asks farmers, how many acres of cover crops did you plant in that case, 2022. So the census survey does not define a cover crop. It just simply asks the farmer to make that determination. So there was clearly an increase, and I would say it's not a single thing that is driving that. I mentioned earlier that soil health and soil erosion are big factors that affect individual producers, but we also see a lot of emerging factors that I think are driving expanded cover crop acres, things like addressing herbicide-resistant weeds that we need additional tools to be able to combat. And so cover crops are proving effective in a lot of cases with these herbicide-resistant weeds. We're seeing farmers that are using those cover crops to help them manage soil moisture, improving rainfall infiltration and soil moisture holding capacity, which can help in dry periods, but likewise improving internal soil drainage that helps in wet periods, and even planting green, a strategy of keeping that cover crop longer in the spring and planting our cash crop while the cover crop is still alive, helping managing spring soil moisture. So there's no question a variety of benefits that are driving that adoption. I'd further point out that those additional acres are coming both from farmers that already have cover crops, where again, they may start with 1 or 2 fields and then gradually add more. I've talked to many farmers who went from having 40 acres of cover crops to now they've got 1,000 or 2,000 acres, or they may be farming 5,000 acres and have all of that cover crop because they're so strongly seeing those benefits. But we are getting new adopters, and we have over 150,000 farm families that are using cover crops, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it. They are found in literally every crop producing county in the United States. Sometimes I run into people saying, well, I haven't seen any cover crops around me. Well, I guarantee they're in your county somewhere if you're growing any type of crop, row crop at all. Sometimes it's hard to tell cover crops there. It may look like winter wheat or something else that we're more used to seeing, but the acreage continues to grow. The seed industry is responding and generating new species to work with and new varieties, and I think the future is bright for cover crops for sure.
Wonderful. Here's an interesting one. How can we develop a payment program for risk reduction to add cover crops to no-till for 2 or 3 years to offset their yield and economic loss with a payment of some type? So that would be taking another barrier away from their interest in management change. So any ideas on how to structure an incentive that would take away that first couple of years of risk?
Well, I think, Steve, there's been some discussion on this at a number of different levels. You know, how do we move toward those incentive areas? And I would say, given the challenges around farm bill policy and everything else and conservation and the farm bill and resources available, of course, I think what our direction has been is how do we find that public-private partnership? How do we find programs that can provide those farmers the incentive to make that investment, you know, share that investment for, you know, 2 to 3 years? And just about everyone that we've talked to and involved with who have done that for 2 to 3 years, they're not going to stop. They really see that advantage. And so it is that initial investment and getting through the transition that's a challenge, but also excuse me, realizing the resource availability, but also the coverage we want to get. Yes, we want to get that 200 plus million acres in the Midwest, but we want to get those acres in the Pacific Northwest and in the Southeast and, you know, in the South. And so we really need to make it available across the board. And so how do we make it as beneficial to all those that want to get involved, and also take advantage of those private dollars that are there that we can really see a change in acres planted. So it's a tough one politically on a number of levels, but also realization that there are some public-private dollars that will help benefit the program going forward. You know, crop insurance incentives was another one that was looked at and is being used. So lots of opportunities.
Great point. And I'll also point people to the prior reports where we were asking farmers about their attitudes and approaches, because you'll see in some of those discussion of risk and discussion of the roles that incentives played in their decisions. And those are all available again on the CTIC website. In fact, if you navigate to the bit.ly on your screen, you'll be able to then look at the other ones as well. Now I'm going to ask the final question as we wrap up, and this is kind of a nice way to end. And so, Rob, I'm going to point this to you first, since you're deep in the university world, and that is, how's university research data being used to influence cover crop decisions?
Well, certainly through our traditional mechanism of taking research out through extension and sharing that with farmers. But I want to more specifically point to, we're seeing an increasing approach of not just doing research at a university farm, but going out and working directly with farmers. And I strongly advocate for that because I think that's where we learn the most from the research in a way that's valuable to other producers as well as advisors. And so that on-farm research is increasingly being recognized as very valuable. The other thing I would say is the university research sometimes, unfortunately, is limited to two-year projects, both because that's how long a master's student may be, but it's also how long the funding lasts. We need more investment in long-term research to help answer the questions that happen over time, the changes in soil health, the development of new varieties. And I know everybody on the call would probably share with me that sentiment that an investment in long-term research through universities and ARS is going to be valuable going forward.
Tremendous. Well, with that, we are just past the top of the hour. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to point out that the CTIC tour registration will continue on beyond today. Just the most favorable early bird pricing ends today. So if you're interested in the tour, check out ctic.org and learn about that. Please do check out the brand new National Cover Crop Survey report. It is on the link that you see on your screen, and we welcome you to share that as widely as you like. Contact us if you have further questions, and stay engaged in the conversation about cover crops. So with that, we will call this to a close. We're going to post the recording of this webinar shortly, and we'll get that URL out to you so that you can either check it back out a second time or share it with your colleagues. So again, thank you, Ryan and Rob and Andy. And thank you, Bethany and Peyton and David Verbata in the background, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.